What's your spiritual rhythm look like? How do you relate to God? How do you hear his voice? How do you get wisdom, discernment in making decisions about the organization and the implications those will have on people's lives around the world? What does that look like?
Patience, I think. My tendency as a type A kind of driven go-getter personality is to just go, go, go. In the years leading up to the birthing of Exodus Cry, it actually kind of laid everything I was doing down, and I was on the night watch of this 24/7 prayer movement and just really just building a root system in the Word of God and just waiting on him for hours and hours and hours a day in prayer. And that, I think, was a really important part of my own personal preparation of like learning how to wait on the Lord and how to wait on God. And because with something like this, it is one of those things where it's like see do, and but also the stakes are higher, and so that's not really a good way to walk this out. And so I think patience, like realizing that getting the quote unquote word of the Lord doesn't always happen in a moment. Oftentimes it happens over a season. It happens over months, where over time you begin to get a sense of a direction. You begin to get a sense of what God's wisdom will look like in this situation or that situation. And so, I think that's been, one of the biggest lessons as far as developing my own spirituality, is just learning that place of patience, and also just relating to Jesus differently. I think it's such a profound privilege for us to be invited to share in the burden of the uncreated God of the universe and what he's carrying. And there was this really formative prophetic experience that this young woman, Jennifer Toledo, had some years back that inspired me. She was in prayer. She was taken up in a vision to heaven and to the Father's house. And in this vision, she was taken to all these different rooms in this, in the Father's house. And there was the spiritual wine cellar where people were becoming intoxicated in the presence of God. And there was the spiritual library where people were stimulating their minds in the knowledge of God. And then there was the intimacy chamber, and it was adorned with the most beautiful things in the entire household. And while she's in there and she's admiring this intimacy chamber, she sees this little wooden hatch doorway that looks out of place. And Jesus is giving her this escorted tour. And she says to Jesus, "What's over there?" And he says, "That room is where I spend most of my time." He said, but very few people will go in that room. She said, he said to her, "You have to be very low to get through the door." And so her curiosity was awakened, and she said, "Well, if that's where you spend most of your time, I want to see what's in that room." And so all these other rooms were populated with people, but she said he took her over to this little wooden hatch door. They crawled through the door, went down a little spiral doorcase, and nobody was in this room. She said there was a solitary chair, and there was windows all the way around. And she said when Jesus took his seat in that chair, suddenly you could see every injustice on the planet all at once. You could hear every single groaning of the prisoner, of the person being raped or violated. You could hear and see every injustice all at once. And she said that room was called the weeping room. So when she asked him, what is that room? He said, that room's where I spend most of my time. You have to get very low to get through the door. Not many people will go there. It's called the weeping room. And she said, she began to weep. She said he spent hours and hours and hours in that chair. And she began to weep, and she began to weep, not just because of the injustice, but because of this beautiful king who would spend his time in that place. And I think of the Garden of Gethsemane where, Jesus is about to pay the ultimate price for sin, and he's feeling the weight of that. And what does he do? He invites his closest friends to be with him in that moment of anguish, and they all fall asleep. And so I just think what a privilege for us to be invited into that place of intimacy, to bear the burden of the Lord regarding this unspeakable injustice that is happening to his creation. And so I think prior to this, I would have interpreted my Christianity as something to believe rather than somebody to become. And I was very preoccupied with having all of my theological T's crossed and I's dotted. But I have come to believe that God cares much more about relational integrity than he does theological accuracy. And that as I've gone on this journey, I don't feel that same pressure to know what I believe about Calvinism versus Arminianism or free will versus, or all these doctrinal things that we get caught up and spend so much time and energy on. I really feel like I'm too busy about my Father's business and just trying to, respond out of that love and compassion of Christ to the vulnerability of those around us, and particularly those whose vulnerability is being exploited in the commercial sex industry. So my faith is a profound part and central of my journey in this, and a central part of how we go about combating this Exodus cry.
Wow. Love that. That's good stuff. What an incredible vision. Where did that happen now?
It was this young woman, Jennifer Toledo. She now leads a church called Expression 58 up in Los Angeles.
Oh, in LA.
Yeah.
Okay. But this happened back in...
This happened a while ago when she went to Africa. She was going to emptying hospitals, just praying for people, and God was just moving in power on her ministry. And she's got an incredible testimony, but this was an experience that she had, and it just really put a vision in my heart of like, what's important, the longer I'm alive, the more I realize our life is a vapor.
Yeah.
I'm going to stand before him one day, and there's so many things that I could have given myself to, but the ultimate currency is the relationship that we build with Christ. And I think the most intimate way to build that relationship is by caring about the things that he cares about. So,
man,
I mean, that sounds cliche, but it's really real. And it's the ultimate experience of being human.